Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're systematically deconstructing the actual mechanics of due process within the framework of common law and assembly courts. Now, for those of you who are already pretty familiar with the structural foundations of things like state and jural assemblies, grand and trial juries, and the various roles of court officers, well, this explainer is going to map out exactly how due process animates and legally secures those institutions. We're going to take a calm, documentary look at the primary source materials to understand exactly how the chronological life cycle of a lawful proceeding is designed to operate. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive into this by anchoring ourselves right to the foundational constitutional guarantee. As the source text highlights, the Fifth Amendment of the National Constitution explicitly states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. You see, this isn't just some abstract philosophical ideal. The sources present this as a strict, non-negotiable legal mandate. It's the absolute prerequisite that has to be satisfied before any assembly or court can take action that affects an individual's fundamental rights. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with what is due process, then move through notice and response, evidence and witnesses, impartial review and juries, transparency and records, and wrap it all up with a summary. Section 1. What is due process? The source materials draw really heavily on landmark precedents, like the Supreme Court case Hale v. Henkel. And what it asserts is fascinating. An individual's rights existed by the law of the land long antecedent, or completely prior to, the actual organization of the state itself. Because these rights are entirely natural and pre-exist the government, the state literally owes no direct protection without the specific vehicle of due process. Therefore, these rights can only be taken away in strict accordance with the Constitution. And as the text notes, that requires an actual victim for an actual crime, complete with actual due process and an impartial jury. So why does this strict adherence matter so deeply? Well, the source materials cite American jurisprudence to argue that failing to observe due process safeguards completely voids a court's judgment. Think about that for a second. If a court acts in a manner contrary to due process, the resulting judgment isn't just flawed or challengeable. It is legally recognized as void. It's literally as if it never happened. Furthermore, the texts point out that all subsequent proceedings founded on that void judgment are themselves regarded as totally invalid. Due process is the very engine that gives a court its true legitimacy. Section 2. Notice and response. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the texts explicitly and strictly define the mechanical act of giving notice. According to the source documents, a person notifies or gives notice to another by taking the steps reasonably required to inform them in the ordinary course of events, whether or not they actually come to know of it. Basically, it means making a documented, legally reasonable effort to reach the individual. In practice, notice functions in 3 very distinct steps. First, the notice is issued using those reasonable steps we just talked about. Second, the receipt is confirmed. As the sources define it, a person receives a notice when it either comes directly to their attention or is duly delivered in a reasonable form to a recognized location. And finally, this successful notification guarantees the individual their vital opportunity to respond. Make no mistake, without this highly transparent initiation step, due process hasn't even begun. Section 3. Evidence and witnesses. This part is absolutely crucial. The documentary evidence emphasizes that strict adherence to rules of evidence is completely mandatory. Citing the case of Merritt v. Hunter, the texts assert that failing to observe the safeguards of evidence actually amounts to a total denial of due process. And here's the real kicker. This denial deprives the court of its jurisdiction. You can kind of see how everything is intimately interlinked here. On top of that, the Fifth Amendment heavily protects witnesses, explicitly stating that no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. That severely reinforces the boundaries of how evidence can be lawfully gathered. Section 4. Impartial review and juries. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark impartial contrast between the administrative boundaries of the justice and the sovereign power of the jury in this system. According to the texts, the justice's role is strictly to ensure a level playing field, enforce fair rules of evidence, and basically keep the proceedings in order. They do not rule on the facts. The jury, on the other hand, considers both the facts and the law. And the sources note that in these judicial courts, the jury actually holds the unequivocal right of jury nullification. Meaning, if they find a law unjust or unworkable in a specific scenario, they are completely free to nullify it for that case. The sources continually emphasize that in American common law courts, the jury evaluates the facts and acts as the ultimate decider. The texts state it super plainly. At the end of the proceedings, the jury renders the decision, and the justice merely reads it out loud. That's a process called pronouncement. So the people, acting directly through the jury, maintain absolute sovereign control over the actual outcome of the case. Section 5, Transparency and Records. Now, to keep everything entirely above board, record keeping is intentionally distributed across multiple parties. It's like a giant puzzle designed to establish an undeniable chain of facts and totally prevent fraud. The text explained that the record keepers are responsible for securing this information. Typically, the juror receives a complete copy that's officially stamped by the recorder. Another copy is maintained by the state jural assembly, and a third copy is securely kept by the county recorder for the public record. The Assembly's dedicated team of record keepers, recording secretaries, and public notaries provides the physical, stamped documentary evidence that solidifies this entire framework. The texts assert that maintaining these very meticulous records of times, dates, and meeting minutes secures the political status of the participants, secures the peace, and ensures the proper, highly transparent functioning of the state jural assemblies. Section 6. Summary. So the crucial point is, how does this all fit together? Let's pull all these puzzle pieces together and review how these interconnected chronological steps mechanically bind the concept of due process to the reality of public justice. It begins anchored in fundamental constitutional guarantees that actually require an actual victim and an actual crime. The process is then initiated by explicit fair notice and confirmed receipt. It is sustained by strict rules of evidence that, if violated, literally strip the court of jurisdiction. The integrity of the decision is fiercely protected by separating the impartial administrative duties of the justice from the sovereign decision-making power of the jury. And finally, the entire proceeding is solidified through highly transparent, widely distributed record keeping. By systematically requiring each of these distinct steps, the system ensures that no individual's rights can be quietly or unfairly stripped away. Due process provides the framework that protects fairness, transparency, and accountability throughout the justice process. So without these strict procedural safeguards, could any system of justice truly claim to be legitimate?